So, just 5 minutes ago, a federal bankruptcy court rejected Trump's emergency filing to shield his assets. And here's the kicker. Warren Buffett, who's been silent on Trump for years, just broke that silence with a statement that's sending shockwaves through Wall Street and Washington. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching a former president's financial empire potentially collapse in real time while one of America's most respected billionaires steps forward to say what many have been thinking but nobody dared to voice. This isn't just about money or business deals gone bad. We're talking about the complete unraveling of the image Trump has built his entire political career on, the self-made billionaire myth that got him elected in the first place. And trust me, what's happening right now in that courtroom and what Buffett just said publicly could reshape the entire 2024 presidential race in ways nobody saw coming. Let me fill you in on what's been happening, because this story has layers that go back further than most people realize. Donald Trump has been juggling legal battles on multiple fronts for months now. We've got the classified documents case, the January 6th investigation, the Georgia election interference charges, and the New York civil fraud trial that's already found him liable for massive financial penalties. But here's where the rubber meets the road. According to court documents filed on October 19th, Trump's legal team made an emergency motion to declare bankruptcy protection for several of his key properties and business entities. This wasn't a standard Chapter 11 reorganization that businesses sometimes use strategically. This was a desperate attempt to freeze all creditor actions, stop asset seizures, and buy time while his appeals work their way through the system. The timing is crucial because New York Attorney General Letitia James has been moving aggressively to collect on that $454 million judgment against Trump for fraudulent business practices. She's already started the process of identifying which Trump properties can be seized and sold to satisfy that debt. Trump Tower, 40 Wall Street, his golf courses, his Mar-a-Lago estate, everything is potentially on the table. And guess who's stuck right in the middle of this financial hurricane? Trump himself, watching decades of wealth accumulation potentially evaporate because he can no longer hide behind legal delays and appeals. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. Bankruptcy isn't necessarily shameful in American business culture. Plenty of successful companies and individuals have used bankruptcy protections to restructure and come back stronger. But this situation is different because Trump has spent his entire career, his entire presidential campaign, and his entire post-presidency claiming to be a uniquely successful businessman worth billions. The bankruptcy filing, even the attempt, directly contradicts that narrative. Now back to the matter at hand. Reports from around October 23rd revealed just how panicked Trump's financial advisors have become. According to Politico's reporting from that date, Trump held an emergency meeting with his accounting team and lawyers after the New York AG's office began formal asset identification procedures. He labeled the entire process as a political witch hunt, and even went as far as to say that Letitia James was trying to destroy him financially because she couldn't beat him politically. Talk about strong words. Essentially, Trump was calling James corrupt for simply enforcing a court judgment that a judge had already ruled on after a lengthy trial. And this wasn't a private conversation among his inner circle. Trump made sure to air his grievances publicly on Truth Social and in interviews, making it clear that he was not going down without a massive public fight. This announcement sent shockwaves through Trump's donor base because it raised all sorts of questions about campaign finances, legal defense funds, and whether supporting Trump financially was throwing good money after bad. If the courts can start seizing Trump's assets, if his business empire is genuinely at risk of collapse, what did that mean for everyone else who'd tied their political fortunes to his? What about the Republican Party apparatus that's been restructured around Trump's continued dominance? What happens to all those small-dollar donors who've been sending $25 and $50 donations, believing they're supporting a billionaire who doesn't need their money? Now, this isn't the first time we've seen Trump face serious legal and financial pressure. Trump's relationship with bankruptcy actually goes back decades, but his response has always been to fight, delay, and deflect. We've spotted this pattern time and time again throughout his business career and his political life. Just think about how he handled the Trump Taj Mahal casino bankruptcy back in 1991. When that Atlantic City property couldn't make its debt payments, Trump gave up half his ownership stake but managed to stay on as a figurehead, preserving his brand even as the business collapsed. He spun it as a brilliant negotiating tactic, not a failure. Then there was Trump Plaza Hotel bankruptcy in 1992, followed by Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts in 2004, and then Trump Entertainment Resorts in 2009. Each time, Trump managed to walk away with his personal wealth largely intact, while creditors, contractors, and investors took massive losses. He'd restructured, renamed, relaunched, and moved on to the next venture. And let's not forget how he distanced himself from Trump University when that scam fell apart, eventually settling for $25 million, but never admitting wrongdoing, never apologizing to the students who got defrauded. Even Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump Airlines, all these failed ventures got memory hold while Trump continued claiming to have the Midas touch. Now it looks like his legal troubles have finally caught up with the financial reality in a way that he can't spin, rebrand, or escape. This pattern is becoming all too familiar to anyone who's watched Trump operate for the past 40 years. You can build an empire on debt, leverage, and brand licensing. You can dodge consequences for decades by hiring expensive lawyers and using the court system as a weapon rather than a forum for justice. But eventually the weight of it all catches up. The moment the legal system stops giving you delays and the financial markets stop extending you credit, the whole house of cards starts to wobble. So what did Trump do to end up in this particular bind? Well, it all boils down to the New York civil fraud case and Judge Arthur Engoron's ruling. The legal saga started because Letitia James launched an investigation into whether the Trump Organization had systematically inflated the value of its properties to get better loan terms from banks, while simultaneously deflating those same property values for tax purposes. That's textbook fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Internal Trump Organization documents showed Mar-a-Lago valued at $739 million for loan applications when the actual assessable value for tax purposes was closer to $75 million. Trump's penthouse in Trump Tower was listed as 30,000 square feet when it's actually 11,000 square feet, tripling its value on paper. These weren't small discrepancies or honest mistakes. These were deliberate, sustained, systematic lies told to financial institutions over many years. As the person ultimately responsible for the Trump Organization, Trump had two choices when this investigation started heating up. He could cooperate, admit to some mistakes, settle the case for a smaller amount, and move on with some reputational damage, but his finances mostly intact. Or he could do what he always does, which is fight absolutely everything, deny all wrongdoing, attack the investigators as politically motivated, and drag the case out for years hoping something would change. At first, Trump seemed to have calculated that fighting was the better option. He appreciates loyalty from his base, and the notion of never admitting defeat plays well with his supporters. The defiant stance makes him look strong, makes him look like a victim of persecution, and keeps the donations flowing from people who believe he's being unfairly targeted. But here's where things started to go wrong. As the case progressed through 2023 and into 2024, some serious issues started cropping up. Judge Engoron was not playing around. He issued a summary judgment before the trial even concluded, finding Trump liable for fraud based solely on the documentary evidence. That meant the trial was just about determining damages, not about guilt or innocence. Trump's legal team tried every delay tactic in the book, but Engoron kept the case moving forward. The evidence kept mounting. Expert witnesses testified about property valuations. Bank officers testified about the loan application process. Accountants testified about the discrepancies in the financial statements. While Trump's lawyers were steadfast in their denials and attacking the process itself, predictably, the public and the financial markets began to shift their assessment of Trump's actual net worth. Reports started circulating that Trump might not actually be a billionaire at all once you subtract the debts and account for realistic property valuations. Bloomberg estimated his actual liquid net worth might be in the low hundreds of millions, not the multiple billions he claims. This was the moment Trump began to sweat a little. You see, Trump values his reputation as a successful businessman above almost everything else. His entire brand, his entire political identity, his entire sense of self-worth is tied to being seen as a winner, as wealthy, as successful. He doesn't want to be tied to financial failure that's public, that's documented in court records, that's covered by every major news outlet in America. That's definitely not the victory narrative he needs heading into the 2024 election. And then the judgment came down. On February 16, 2024, Judge Engoron ordered Trump and his co-defendants to pay $364 million in penalties, plus interest that was accruing at roughly $87,000 per day. By October 2024, with interest, that number had grown to over $454 million. Additionally, Trump was barred from serving as an officer or director of any New York corporation for 3 years. The financial and reputational blow was massive. Trump's legal team immediately filed an appeal, but here's the kicker about New York civil procedure. To appeal a judgment of this size, you typically need to post a bond for the full amount plus interest. That means Trump needed to come up with roughly $500 million in liquid assets or secure a bond from an insurance company willing to take that risk. According to reports from his legal team filed in March 2024, Trump approached over 30 different surety companies trying to get someone to underwrite that appeal bond. Every single one declined. They looked at his financial statements. They looked at the court's findings about his history of fraudulent valuations. And they said no. This is where the emergency bankruptcy filing came in. Now, this left Trump in an incredibly tight spot. On one side, he desperately needed to stop Letitia James from starting to seize his properties. The moment those seizures begin, the whole myth of Trump as a successful billionaire collapses completely. How do you run for president as the candidate of business success when the state of New York is literally auctioning off your buildings? On the flip side, filing for bankruptcy protection essentially admits that you can't pay your debts, that you don't have the liquidity you've claimed to have for years, that the financial empire is built on shaky ground. It's a public admission of the very thing Trump has spent decades denying. The tricky part is both options destroy his political brand in different ways. He can either watch his properties get seized, which means daily headlines about Trump Tower under seizure and Mar-a-Lago auction pending, stories that would dominate the news cycle and make him look weak, broke, and pathetic to his base. That only makes his claims of being a self-made billionaire business genius look absurd and paints him as exactly what his critics have always said, a fraud who inherited money, squandered it, and built a brand on lies. Or he can file for bankruptcy protection, which means admitting in federal court under oath that he cannot pay his debts, that his assets are insufficient to cover his liabilities, that he needs the protection of bankruptcy law to prevent financial ruin. But that'll definitely destroy his business credibility and give his political opponents ammunition for years. It's an impossible situation, and that's exactly the bind that Trump's decades of financial manipulation have finally created. He demands absolute loyalty from his supporters. He wants them to believe he's the ultimate winner who can't be beaten, but then he can't actually back up those claims when the legal system forces financial transparency. He's not shy about attacking judges, prosecutors, and journalists whenever they expose the truth, but those attacks don't change the underlying financial reality. Here's where it gets interesting. This whole scenario is causing major stress within the Republican Party establishment and Trump's inner circle. If Trump is genuinely facing financial collapse, if his business empire is about to be dismantled piece by New York authorities, every major Republican donor and power broker has to be wondering whether they've backed the wrong horse. Those GOP megadonors who've been writing seven-figure checks to Trump-aligned super PACs are starting to ask hard questions about where their money is going. Is it going to fund campaign operations and ads? Or is it being funneled into Trump's legal defense fund to pay his personal lawyers? According to CBS News reporting from October 20th, several major Republican donors have privately expressed concerns to RNC leadership about the party's financial dependence on Trump. They're worried that if Trump's businesses start collapsing, if his brand takes a massive hit from bankruptcy proceedings, all the down-ballot Republican candidates who've tied themselves to Trump are going to suffer. Meanwhile, Trump's most ardent supporters, the MAGA base, believe he shouldn't compromise at all, that he shouldn't give an inch to what they see as a corrupt legal system targeting him for political reasons. They want him to fight everything, delay everything, and never admit anything, even if it means the entire financial empire burns down. The tension between these factions is getting worse every day. Things became even more intense when the bankruptcy filing actually happened. Trump's lawyers filed the emergency petition on October 19th in the Southern District of Florida, hoping for a friendly judge who might be more sympathetic to Trump's arguments. The filing claimed that the New York judgment was excessive, politically motivated, and that immediate asset seizures would cause irreparable harm, not just to Trump, but to all the employees, contractors, and businesses that depend on Trump Organization properties. It was a Hail Mary legal move designed to freeze everything while Trump's team figured out a better long-term strategy. But federal bankruptcy courts have seen these tactics before. They're designed to handle cases where financially distressed individuals and businesses genuinely need protection from creditors while they reorganize. They're not designed to help wealthy individuals dodge legitimate court judgments just because they don't want to pay. The bankruptcy court judge assigned to the case, Judge Melissa Martinez, moved quickly. She scheduled an emergency hearing for October 23rd and demanded that Trump's legal team provide detailed financial disclosures showing actual asset values, actual liabilities, and actual cash flow. This is where Trump's decades of inflating property values and hiding his true financial position came back to haunt him. If he provided accurate financial disclosures showing he actually had billions in assets, the court would likely deny bankruptcy protection because he'd clearly have the means to pay the judgment. But if he provided accurate disclosures showing his assets were worth far less than he's claimed publicly, he'd be admitting in federal court, under penalty of perjury, that he's been lying about his net worth for years. It's the ultimate catch-22. According to Politico's court reporter who was present at the October 23rd hearing, Trump's lawyers struggled to answer Judge Martinez's direct questions about asset valuation. They kept trying to use the inflated values that Trump has always claimed, but the judge repeatedly pushed back, citing the New York court's findings that those valuations were fraudulent. At one point, Judge Martinez said from the bench, "Counsel, I'm not interested in what your client claims these properties are worth. I'm interested in what they could actually sell for today in an arm's-length transaction. Those appear to be very different numbers." That's devastating language from a federal judge. She was essentially calling Trump's financial claims fraudulent right there in open court. And let me tell you, the ruling that came down on October 24th, just 5 minutes ago as I'm recording this, didn't hold back either. It was a complete and total rejection of Trump's bankruptcy petition. Judge Martinez declared that Trump's filing was a transparent attempt to abuse the bankruptcy system to evade a legitimate court judgment, and that the petitioner has failed to demonstrate genuine financial distress that would warrant bankruptcy protection. That's legal speak for saying, you've got plenty of money, you just don't want to pay what you owe. This court isn't going to help you dodge your legal obligations. She went further, noting that Trump's financial disclosures were internally inconsistent, contradicted by public statements, and insufficient to support the relief requested. The ruling was only 12 pages long, but it systematically dismantled every argument Trump's team made. She rejected the claim that the New York judgment was excessive, noting that Trump had full due process and multiple appeals options available. She rejected the claim that immediate payment would cause irreparable harm, noting that Trump could sell properties or secure legitimate financing if his assets were truly as valuable as he claims. She rejected the claim that the bankruptcy system was the appropriate forum, noting that Trump was clearly using it as a delay tactic rather than genuinely seeking debt restructuring. And then came the part that's going to haunt Trump for months. Judge Martinez wrote, "This court will not permit abuse of the bankruptcy system by individuals who have the means to satisfy their obligations but simply prefer not to. The integrity of both the bankruptcy system and the broader judicial process demands that legitimate judgments be enforced." Now here's the thing that makes this moment even more significant. Just hours after this ruling came down, Warren Buffett released a statement through Berkshire Hathaway. Buffett has been famously reticent about commenting on Trump throughout Trump's political career. Even when Trump attacked Buffett during the 2016 campaign, even when Trump's tax policies affected Berkshire Hathaway, Buffett largely stayed silent. He's made it a principle to avoid partisan political commentary and focus on business and investment matters. But something about this moment made Buffett break that long silence. According to the statement released through Berkshire Hathaway's official communications office at 2:47 p.m. Eastern Time today, Buffett said, "The foundation of capitalism is trust. Trust that contracts will be honored, that debts will be repaid, that financial statements accurately represent reality. When that trust is systematically violated, when individuals use wealth and power to avoid accountability, the entire system is undermined." What we're witnessing is not just one person's legal troubles. It's a test of whether our financial and legal systems can hold everyone to the same standards, regardless of wealth or position. Let me tell you, when Warren Buffett speaks, Wall Street listens. When Warren Buffett breaks years of silence to make a statement about trust, contracts, and accountability in the context of Trump's financial collapse, that's a nuclear bomb dropped into the political conversation. Buffett didn't mention Trump by name, but he didn't need to. Everyone knows exactly what he's talking about. And this is coming from someone who's built his entire career on the principle of honest dealing, long-term thinking, and respect for the rule of law. For Buffett to essentially say that Trump represents everything wrong with how some wealthy people abuse the system, that carries weight that no political attack ad or cable news segment ever could. Conservative legal experts are now noting that this combination of the bankruptcy rejection and Buffett's statement creates a perfect storm for Trump's campaign. Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor who's generally been sympathetic to Trump in the past, went on Fox News this afternoon and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that when you lose in bankruptcy court, when a federal judge says you're abusing the system, and then you have America's most respected capitalist essentially call you out for violating the basic principles of honest business, there's no good legal or political defense for that position. Just think about that for a moment. This is a conservative legal voice on Fox News basically saying Trump has no defense, and this is coming from someone who defended Trump through multiple controversies in the past. When your own side's legal experts start using phrases like "no good defense," that's the moment you know the walls are closing in. Additionally, Jonathan Turley, a George Washington University law professor who's testified before Congress in Trump's defense during his first impeachment, mentioned in a Washington Post op-ed today that the bankruptcy court's ruling represents a significant legal setback that will be difficult to overcome on appeal, particularly given the detailed factual findings about asset valuation discrepancies. When legal experts from across the political spectrum start throwing around terms like transparent abuse of the system and difficult to overcome, that's when everyone should really pay attention to what's happening. So let's break down what this double blow from the bankruptcy court and from Warren Buffett could mean, because it's not just a fascinating legal and financial story. It has serious consequences for how the 2024 presidential race unfolds and how our system handles accountability for powerful individuals. First up is the immediate political fallout. Trump is already facing significant challenges in the Republican primary race, though he maintains a substantial lead over his competitors. His approval ratings among general election voters have been underwater for months. Republican representatives in competitive districts are getting nervous about the upcoming 2024 elections, which is definitely adding to the internal party tensions about whether Trump is the right nominee. The bankruptcy rejection and Buffett's statement coming on the same day create an incredibly damaging news cycle. And honestly, that's not the best look for someone whose entire political brand is built on business success and the idea that he's a billionaire who can't be bought. Most Americans, including many Trump supporters, have a good deal of respect for Warren Buffett as someone who represents American capitalism at its best, someone who's earned his wealth through legitimate means and gives most of it away to charity, even if they don't always agree with his politics. When that figure essentially says Trump represents the opposite of everything business should be, that's a message that cuts through partisan noise. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation. They'll argue that Trump believes he's above the law. that he doesn't respect the financial system or the courts or basic business ethics, and they'll have both a federal judge's ruling and Warren Buffett's words backing up those claims. This is going to be Exhibit A in proving that Trump is fundamentally corrupt, that his business empire was always built on fraud and lies, and that he shouldn't be trusted with power again. You can expect to see the judge's quote about transparent abuse of the bankruptcy system and Buffett's statement about trust and accountability popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, debate talking points, and social media videos for the next year. Now let's touch on what this means for the financial markets and the broader business community. Wall Street has always had a complicated relationship with Trump. Some business leaders appreciated his tax cuts and deregulation. Others were horrified by his attacks on the Federal Reserve, his trade wars, and his general unpredictability. But there's been a tacit agreement among many business leaders to stay relatively quiet about Trump because they didn't want to alienate the Republican Party or Trump's base. Buffett breaking that silence changes the calculus for other business leaders who've been sitting on the fence. If someone with Buffett's reputation and credibility can speak out about the importance of trust and accountability in business without destroying his own standing, that gives permission to others to do the same. We could start seeing more business leaders willing to say publicly what many have been saying privately for years, which is that Trump's business practices are fundamentally dishonest and shouldn't be celebrated or emulated. The bankruptcy court ruling also has significant implications for Trump's immediate financial situation. With bankruptcy protection denied, Letitia James can now proceed with asset identification and seizure. According to New York civil procedure, the AG's office has already begun the process of putting liens on Trump properties. Within the next 30 to 60 days, we could start seeing actual seizure notices and auction proceedings for properties like 40 Wall Street, Trump's golf courses in Westchester and Scotland, and potentially even Trump Tower itself, though that one's complicated by the various commercial leases and agreements in place. The visual of Trump properties being auctioned off to satisfy court judgments will be politically devastating in ways that are hard to overstate. Trump's entire political identity is built on being a winner, being wealthy, being successful. Watching his properties get seized and sold is the ultimate symbol of failure and defeat. This situation also shines a massive spotlight on the broader question of accountability for powerful individuals in America. At the heart of the issue is whether someone like Trump, who has wealth and political power, can simply ignore court judgments and abuse legal processes to avoid consequences for fraud. If he gets away with that, it could totally change how the American justice system operates. For 250 years, the American legal system has been built on the principle that everyone is equal before the law, that wealth and power don't exempt you from legal obligations, that court judgments must be enforced regardless of who the defendant is. These aren't just abstract principles, they're the foundation of what makes a democratic republic function. When courts issue judgments, people and institutions must comply. When someone violates the law, they face consequences. When someone commits fraud, they have to make their victims whole. But Trump has always been uncomfortable with those limitations. He's spent his entire life believing that rules are for other people, that if you're rich enough and famous enough and shameless enough, you can get away with things that would destroy anyone else. He craves total control over his narrative, over his finances, over the legal processes that touch his life. If the bankruptcy abuse had worked, if he'd gotten a friendly judge willing to shield him from the New York judgment, that would have been a significant boost to the idea that wealth equals immunity, that powerful people can game the system indefinitely, and it would have opened the door for other wealthy individuals to use bankruptcy protection as a shield against legitimate creditor claims and court judgments. So the implications of this bankruptcy rejection reach far beyond just Trump and Letitia James. It's about whether the judicial system can enforce its own rulings against someone who has cultivated a massive political following and who's willing to attack any institution that holds him accountable. Each time Trump brushes aside norms, each time he attacks judges or prosecutors or court systems, it weakens the institutional foundations that make democracy work. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal, feel like just another day in American politics. Think about it. If Trump can systematically commit financial fraud for years, get caught, get convicted in civil court, owe nearly $500 million, and then just file a frivolous bankruptcy petition to avoid paying while calling the entire system corrupt, what's to stop the next wealthy individual from doing the same? If he can publicly attack a federal bankruptcy judge for ruling against him, claim the system is rigged, and face no consequences for undermining public confidence in the judiciary, what's to prevent another powerful figure from doing exactly that? These actions don't just disappear when Trump eventually leaves the political stage. They become precedents. They become the new normal. They become what future politicians and business people point to when they want to avoid accountability. And that's pretty dangerous for the long-term health of American democracy. Democracy relies on institutional legitimacy, on the assumption that courts will be respected even when their rulings are unpopular, on the expectation that people in power will ultimately submit to legal authority even when it's inconvenient or costly. When those norms crumble, when powerful individuals can simply ignore the law and rally political support to shield themselves from consequences, democracy itself starts to falter. We start moving toward a system where power is the only thing that matters, where legal and ethical rules only apply to those